The first time you see it, something in your chest tightens, because this is not supposed to exist. Cadillac buried the Eldorado name decades ago, and yet here it sits under the lights, fins raised like it never left, like the whole idea of American luxury just refused to die quietly. I'm Automotive Pulse, and if you've ever wondered what happens when a brand stops chasing the future and instead drags its own legacy kicking and screaming into it, stay with me, because there's one engineering decision buried in this car's floor pan that most enthusiasts are going to argue about for years. And I promise we'll get there. Let's be clear about what we're looking at. This is a realistic next-generation interpretation of the Eldorado nameplate, a projected production vision built on what Cadillac's current design language and engineering direction suggest the brand could realistically deliver if it chose to resurrect its most romantic name. Nothing here is officially confirmed by General Motors. What you're about to experience is an informed, grounded reconstruction of what a 2027 Eldorado Ghia could believably become, built from real design trajectories, real platform philosophy, and real automotive history. Stand back from it for a moment. The proportions are long, low, and unapologetically confident, a silhouette that refuses to whisper. Those dagger-shaped tail fins aren't nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. They're a statement, a deliberate reminder that Cadillac once defined what American opulence looked like on four wheels, and this car is engineered to reclaim that conversation rather than apologize for it. The vertical waterfall grille commands the front end like a chrome ribcage, aggressive without losing elegance, framed by slim horizontal light blades that read as calm, focused, almost surgical against the drama surrounding them. Rose gold accents trace the rocker panels, the diffuser, the exhaust finishers, a warm metallic thread running through cool white bodywork, and that contrast is intentional. It's the tension between old money restraint and new money confidence. And Cadillac's projected design philosophy leans directly into that friction rather than smoothing it over. The wheels, deep-dish multi-spoke units wrapped in low-profile rubber, ground the entire silhouette, making a car this large look coiled rather than heavy. Every line on this body is doing emotional work before a single spec sheet gets mentioned. Open the door and the sensation changes immediately. The cabin breathes warmth. Cream leather stitched in a diamond quilt pattern, rose gold trim catching ambient light along the dash and console like something poured rather than machined. There's a faint scent of tanned leather and brushed metal, the kind of smell that tells you someone spent real time deciding how this space should feel before they decided how it should function. The seating position is low but commanding, thighs supported, shoulders relaxed, the kind of posture that says grand touring, not sport compact. The steering wheel is thick-rimmed, wrapped in soft leather with rose gold spokes, weighted just enough to feel substantial without feeling heavy in your hands. The dashboard fluting catches light like brushed champagne, and the Eldorado script etched into the trim isn't decoration, it's a signature, a quiet reminder of exactly what car you're sitting in. Cabin isolation is engineered to be nearly total. Active noise cancellation paired with thick glass and dense door seals working to erase the outside world the moment you close the door. Displays are recessed into the architecture rather than bolted on top of it, integrated so the technology feels like part of the furniture instead of a screen fighting for attention. Underneath that theatrical bodywork sits a projected engineering approach that stays honest to what this car actually is. This is not a track weapon wearing a luxury badge. Cadillac's realistic direction for a flagship like this would center on a twin-turbocharged V8, engineered around 650 to 700 horsepower, and paired with a broad, immediate torque curve rather than a peaky one, because this nameplate has always been about effortless authority, not raw violence. Estimated output in that range, paired with a 10-speed automatic transmission tuned for smoothness over aggression, positions the Eldorado as a car that accelerates like it's exhaling rather than straining. All-wheel drive would be the expected layout, giving the car composure in real weather rather than just showroom bravado. This is where that earlier tension comes back, because the engineering team internally would have had to decide between chasing supercar numbers or protecting the character that made the original Eldorado legendary. And the believable choice here is character over spectacle, A decision some enthusiasts will respect and others will quietly resent. Now close your eyes and imagine the startup. There's a brief pause, a soft mechanical settling, and then the V8 wakes with a low, rounded growl, more baritone than shout, the kind of idle that vibrates gently through the seat rather than rattling the cabin. Blip the throttle and the exhaust tightens into a deeper, more textured note, muscular but restrained, like the engine is choosing not to reveal everything at once. Roll into acceleration and the sound builds in layers, turbo spool blending into exhaust pulse, the cabin staying composed even as the rear end settles slightly under load. Gear shifts arrive with a soft mechanical thud rather than a jarring bang, confident but never harsh. Push toward the upper RPM range and the tone sharpens just enough to remind you there's real performance under the elegance, an emotional peak rather than a mechanical scream. Then lift off, and the cabin falls back into near silence, the outside world fading in like it was never gone. The first moments of actual driving tell you everything the sound already promised. Steering is weighted with quiet confidence, not artificially heavy, not nervous, just accurate enough to trust immediately. Throttle response builds progressively rather than jumping, which suits a car built for long-distance authority rather than stoplight bravado. Brake feel is firm and linear, communicating exactly how much stopping power you're using without demanding effort. The suspension, likely an adaptive air setup tuned for both comfort and control, absorbs road imperfections with a soft initial compliance before tightening up the moment cornering load increases, giving the chassis a surprising sense of balance for a car this size. Road texture comes through the wheel in gentle, informative pulses rather than harsh feedback, letting you feel the surface without being punished by it. The seats hold you through direction changes with quiet support, and in that first wave of acceleration, there's a genuine emotional reaction, a mixture of disbelief and reassurance, because a car wearing this much heritage weight actually moves with modern composure. Technology here is meant to disappear into the experience rather than dominate it. Adaptive driver assistance systems are expected to handle long highway stretches with quiet confidence, easing driver fatigue on cross-country runs rather than replacing engagement entirely. Over-the-air updates would keep the car's software evolving long after delivery, a modern necessity for any flagship trying to stay relevant for a decade. AI-assisted cabin personalization, adjusting seat position, lighting, and climate based on driver preference is a believable inclusion that reflects where the segment is heading. None of this technology is meant to impress with jargon. It's meant to make the ownership experience feel effortless, intuitive, and human, which is exactly the tone Cadillac would realistically pursue for a car built to be lived in, not just admired. Practicality matters here too, because a car like this has to survive real ownership, not just launch events. The trunk is deep enough for genuine long-distance luggage. Rear seat space is generous enough for adult passengers on real road trips, and ride quality remains composed even over broken pavement. A necessary compromise given the low stance and larger wheel package. That's the honest limitation worth naming, because a stance this dramatic inevitably sacrifices some ride softness compared to a traditional luxury sedan, and enthusiasts chasing showroom drama will need to accept a firmer everyday ride in exchange for that visual presence, positioned realistically in the market. Expected pricing would land somewhere between $145,000 and $175,000 depending on trim and personalization. A bracket that places it in direct emotional competition with elegant grand tours from Bentley and Maserati rather than mainstream luxury sedans. When you consider what that number actually buys, it's not just horsepower or leather, it's the resurrection of an American name that once meant something to an entire generation, engineered with modern restraint instead of empty nostalgia. Buyers here aren't just purchasing a car, they're purchasing cultural memory rebuilt with real engineering intent. And that emotional value is difficult to price, but easy to feel once you're behind the wheel. This car doesn't quite fit neatly into existing categories. It isn't a segment disruptor in the traditional sense, and it isn't simply a legacy revival either. It sits closer to a modern American grand tourer with unapologetic emotional roots, positioned as something built to challenge how the industry defines flagship luxury rather than simply competing spec for spec. The person this car is built for isn't chasing lap times or bragging rights. They're someone who understands that driving can be theater. Someone who values history as much as horsepower. Someone who wants a car that feels like an event every time the door closes, not just transportation between 2 points. This is a driver who appreciates patience in engineering, who respects restraint as much as power, and who sees a long coastal drive or an empty desert highway at dawn as the natural habitat for a car like this. Windows up, engine breathing low, horizon stretching endlessly ahead. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you, because this is where the real debate begins. Do you think reviving a legendary nameplate like Eldorado honors automotive history? Or does it risk diluting a legacy that was built in a completely different era of driving? Drop your honest take in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into what a next-generation Eldorado could realistically become, subscribe to Automotive Pulse, because this is exactly the kind of conversation we live for. In the end, this car doesn't ask you to remember the past. It asks you to feel what American luxury was always meant to feel like when nobody was apologizing for it. This video is a realistic, next-generation concept interpretation and is not an officially confirmed Cadillac product. All specifications, performance estimates, pricing, technology features, and design details discussed are projected, anticipated, or engineered interpretations based on current automotive industry trends, publicly available information, and reliable design analysis available at the time of writing. Nothing in this presentation should be considered an official announcement, and all details remain subject to change pending genuine confirmation from General Motors or Cadillac.